Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. We want to welcome you to the Dallas County Master Gardener Association's July meeting. This is our second meeting here at C.C. Young Senior Facility. We want to give special thanks to Brian Parman, Neil Howard, Sue Smith, Joellen Nobby, Dorothy Thompson, and the entire team for organizing another lovely event in this facility, this time complete with delicious watermelon. For those who don't know me, I'm Cynthia Jones, and this is Zandra Ferris. She and I are going to do our best to pinch hit for our president, Monica Nagel, who, out of an abundance of caution, will not be with us today as she recovers from a mild case of COVID. And being the thoughtful person that she is, she just wanted to use this as an example to remind all of us that COVID is still out there and that we should take proper precautions. Uh-oh. What happened? So we seem to have lost our... There we go. Okay. So hopefully most of you are already familiar with our DCMGA website and all that it has to offer. The team has been making some updates recently, and we believe they are both interesting and useful, and we'd like to call your attention to those things. While many of the pages on the website are open to the public, such as the home page, the About Us page, and the public events on the calendar, Master Gardeners will need to sign in to access the members-only page, as well as all the events that are posted on the website calendar. To log in, you will put in your username or email address, followed by your password. If you have forgotten your password or otherwise need some assistance, our webmaster, Alexa Peterson, where are you, Alexa? Way in the back. Alexa will be happy to help you reset your password or anything else that needs doing after the meeting. So several of the recent updates may be found on the members only page under Master Gardener Resources. The revised volunteer management system, or the VMS page, includes how to log in, how to record your hours, a video demonstration of these processes, and a link to the most recent list of continuing education opportunities. The contact list has also been updated with the names and email addresses of all the class captains through 2023. And the board of directors has been updated to include our new treasurer, Sue John. The continuing education's opportunity also has a tab under Master Gardener Resources, which will be updated regularly by our leader, Cindy Large. There you will find all kinds of options for fulfilling your yearly certification requirement of 6 hours of continuing education. There will also be links to previous meetings that you may view if you had missed them already to count toward your education hours. We welcome your feedback and your suggestions so that together we can make the website the best that it can be. Remember to check it often, because we at least once a month, will be adding new feature articles by some of our very own Master Gardeners, like Kay McInnes and Ellen Schwab and others. We will have monthly garden tasks, project spotlight, an article by a featured speaker, news items, and more. And we welcome your contributions to the website as well. If you have something that you deem appropriate to share with us, please do so. Next, it is my honor to announce our Making a Difference Awards. The first one will go to Steve Hauser. Steve Hauser. Can you hear me okay? Okay. The essence of Steve's horticultural mission is found in one of his favorite characters from Dr. Seuss, the Lorax, who says, "I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees." And Steve certainly does that. His lifelong devotion to trees and his commitment to educate the public has been fulfilled by an over 40-year career addressing the needs of Dallas County with respect to trees. He's a well-known, most accomplished arborist. In 1998, he became a Dallas County Master Gardener, and he soon became an indispensable member of the Dallas Master Gardeners. He was a favorite spokesman for community outreach. He is an invaluable source on the help desk. Almost everybody here probably took his class on trees when you went to Master Gardener School. And he is a highly respected liaison and advisor to various governmental agencies, developers, and organizations throughout Dallas County and beyond. He is the only volunteer in Texas to receive not one, but 2 Presidential Lifetime Achievement Awards. One in 2008 as a Master Naturalist, and one in 2018 as a Dallas County Master Gardener. In 2020, he was awarded first place as the Outstanding Master Gardener by the Texas Master Gardener Association. The Dallas Morning News captured his profound impact by saying, "He may be the best friend a threatened tree ever had." How fortunate we are in Dallas County to have Steve Hauser as our own Lorax, one who has dedicated his life to making things better for trees and the environment. So that is about Steve. I think our award winners are not here today, so if we'll just save our applause till the end, please. So the next award there we go. The next awards go actually to the incredible dynamic duo from RB1 County Farms. Lisa Patterson from the class of 2012 and Mary Claire Milner from the class of 2021 lead the vegetable team at RB1 in bed preparation, propagation, irrigation, planting, and harvesting. They collect harvest data and they stage vegetables for pickup. They assist Katerina with her community garden classes. Last year, they were instrumental in writing a grant to Ecolab, which granted them an award of $6,500 for a new greenhouse. In February, Lisa was recognized for 2,500 hours of volunteer service. Mary Claire, even though she is from the class of 2021, has earned over 1,700 volunteer service hours and was Intern of the Year in 2021. Together, these amazing leaders, along with their dedicated team, have overcome the challenges of our unpredictable weather to grow and donate over 4,000 pounds of fruit, vegetables, and herbs in 2021 and 2022. And I know that Lisa and Mary Claire are not here, but several of the members of their dedicated team are here, And I would like them to stand as we give a warm applause to all our outstanding Master Gardeners. And now I'm going to hand over the mic to my friend, Zandra Ferris.
There we go. Can you hear me? Yeah. Way in the back. Okay. There it is. Okay. Okay, my one part of this is to talk about the Volunteers of the Month, and I will get to that in a moment. First, I want to say hello, dear friends. It's good to be here. It is kind of a deja vu standing here because Cynthia and I used to do this way back in 2017 and 2018. So it's a pleasure to be here with you. So for Volunteers of the Month, I'm going to read them out. If you are here, please stand so we can recognize you. Janet Lane, John Ellis, Michael Bloom, Sue Weiner, Larry Thompson, Margaret Horinsky, Don Heberlin, hey Don, Joellen Novi, Abby Bolich, and Liz Ming. Thank you for your service. And now for the Volunteers of the Month in June. Steve Hauser, Gail Lawrence. Huh? Oh. I gotta find where I put it. That's weird. Can I just advance it this way? Oh, that's the wrong one. Where did I put it?
Did you put it down?
Oh, never mind. Steve Hauser, Gail Lawrence, Connie Gutierrez, Patty Wallace, Lynn Nadalo, Susan Thornberry, Kathy Lyon, Cindy Bicking, come on, Cindy, Joe LeBay, and Elizabeth Wilkerson. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joe. Now for Taste of the Garden. It was a fabulous time at Anne Frank Elementary. And if you went to that garden, I know you saw some great things for the children at the elementary school to be part of. And so there was more than a dozen people. And if you participated, thank you. And I hope that all will go out and see and be a volunteer. I think you'll find it a fabulous project. Okay, just an announcement. Share the love table. I'm not sure. Is it outside? Thank you. If you brought horticulture-related products, please. We thank you so much for doing that. It's such an important thing to share with each other and to our guests. So, all right. Okay, and now I want to introduce to you Chris Geyer. She is our safety coordinator. I'm going to advance your slides. When you're ready,
Okay.
say when.
They chose, can y'all hear me? They chose me before I fell in my own garden and broke my arm. So I think if that had happened before, they wouldn't have ever asked me to be the safety coordinator. But I was a nurse. Well, I guess I'm still a nurse, but I've been retired for 3 years. And my background most recently was in infection control. So I think that's probably why they picked me. However, my whole career was in pediatrics, so I don't consider myself, the know-it-all for adult safety, but, I was a CPR instructor and I taught for many years. So anyway, I'm glad to serve and hope, that I can reach out to any other people who might be able to give me some advice. But we've had a reprieve today. I guess we no longer need heat-related discussion. No. I mean, it was in the 90s today, which is great, but we're going to be back up into the triple digits this next week. So I wanted to add a slide on your risk factors. So these are just some of the risk factors that I think everybody needs to be aware of. This makes you more susceptible to it could make you more susceptible to a heat-related illness while we're out gardening or anywhere out in this heat. So as you know, we've had high temps along with high humidity, so that increases everybody's risk. And for those of us that are over 65, as much as I don't want to know this, but that puts us more at risk. There's some conditions that are listed, and then also medications. There's people that take medications and have to, and you may not know this, but because of that, it puts you maybe at a higher risk for being out there. So you need to be more cautious and then let people know if you're having trouble that maybe you're on some of these meds. So, and then alcohol use within the past 24 hours sets you at risk. So before I'm out in the garden, I want to make sure I don't go to happy hour the night before. So the next slide. We've talked about this before. I added a couple of things or emphasized some things. Key thing is to hydrate before you go out in the heat. So, and then pick your clothing, wear lightweight, light-colored clothing. If you can have it with UV, you probably, all your tops, Janet, probably have UV protection. But work with a buddy out there. Don't get in an isolated situation where if you're starting to have some symptoms, you don't have anybody around to help you. So the CDC talks about 8 ounces of water every 15 to 20 minutes. That's a lot of water. But if you get thirsty before you drink, you're probably going to have a problem. So you want to drink before you think you're thirsty. So I don't know that any of us can take a break in AC, but that's preferable. So if you can get into some air conditioning or at least get into the shade. And then Katerina, yes?
You go sit in your car?
Yeah. Yeah, make sure you turn it on with the... Yeah, I mean, one of the things in our guidelines is, I mean, that's, kids that are left in cars that aren't turned on with the AC on. I mean, that's not good at all. But yeah, so yeah, we can get an AC. So go sit in your car, turn it on, turn the AC on. Katerina was going to do a demonstration on cooling down with claws, and unfortunately she wasn't able to do that. I think she's going to do that at a later time. But you can always, you might throw a washcloth or a small hand towel in your supply bag or bucket or whatever. And then if you're really feeling hot, or even before you get hot, you can get a wet towel and put it around your neck, and that'll help kind of get your core cooled down. All right, the next one is, so don't ignore the early signs of overheating. So, I mean, we're all going to sweat, and we hope we're sweating, because that's, the body's natural function to cool itself down. But if you're getting really tired, especially if you're getting lightheaded or dizzy, you have a headache or nausea, those are some signs not to ignore, because that means you're probably getting stressed by the heat. Anybody have any questions on this? Okay. It's just always keep it in mind, especially right now. I do want to say that we've got some CPR training that's going to become available. Cynthia and I had the pleasure of meeting with Haley Mosley. She's a nurse here at CC Young. She has her doctorate in education, and she's also a CPR instructor. So she's willing to do some CPR training for us. So we can possibly get certified, which would be an 8-hour course. That's what's required for healthcare professionals. If any of y'all are interested, I think Cynthia and I might do that. But she's got a class that's going to be 2 hours long, and it's the Friends and Family class. So it teaches you adult CPR. It also is going to teach you, it's going to cover choking on an infant and an adult. So if y'all are grandparents with little kids, this is going to be a great class. She's going to do fall precautions. She's going to also talk about heat-related strategies, and so it'll be a 2-hour class, either Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. It can be either morning or afternoon. So I wanted to get a show of hands of people who might be interested in attending that 2-hour class. Okay, good. So I talked with Cynthia. I think I might put the information, verify the dates, put the information in the next, mark your calendar, and then maybe with a contact for y'all to notify me of what you might be interested in, so we can get those set up. The sooner the better, I think. August or September, and September. All right, any questions on CPR? All right, thank you.
Chris is going to be a wonderful safety coordinator, right? So here we go. Oh, there we go. You want to come up? Can you all still hear me with this mic?
No. Double?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce to you, for those that don't know her, Lisa Meyer. Lisa is from the class of 2016, and she is the garden leader at the Paradise Missionary Baptist Church for the youth, and she's going to tell us about all the wonderful work they've been doing. Lisa, do you want to use it, or do you want us to, here?
Yes. I'm really not good at multitasking and holding two things. And probably if I were a more seasoned public speaker, I would have mastered that. But I'm here today to give you some background on Paradise Missionary Baptist Church and their 3T Youth Program. If you look at the first slide, just back up. The other thing I'll say is, when I was asked to do this, they said, oh, just show a lot of pictures, a little text. Well, what I find when I'm volunteering, the first obstacle was finding some pictures, because once I arrive, my phone is on silent and in my purse. So when I'm leading a group, I am not a photographer. When I'm touring, stand back, because I'll take 100 pictures in a garden. But that's not what I do with this. But I'm a lover of pollinators, birds and bees. Anybody that knows me knows that. But if you look in this basil picture, the reason I took it, there were 2 bees in the basil flowers. So not great for what you're going to cook with, but herbs are also wonderful pollinator plants. So plant some for you and some for the bees. Moving on to Paradise Missionary Baptist Church. The church is located in the South Dallas Singing Hills neighborhood. I-35 East Laurelland Road exit. Easy to find because you exit off Laurelland Road and you go a mile down Laurelland, which turns into East Redbird. So you can't get lost. It is easy to find. It has a community garden with 20 raised beds. And Dallas County Massner gardeners consulted on the design. Lisa Patterson, who was recognized today for all her good work at Road and Bridge 1, was the garden, I don't know what we call them now, but she attended vegetable training, so she was a vegetable expert and assisted them with design and provided guidance on installation. And in 2016, we had a group called Master Gardeners on Demand. They assisted with installation of the drip irrigation system in the first week of July in 2016. So that was one of those days where you definitely needed to manage your heat exhaustion. I turned bright red. I think the kids, the youth there, thought I was a medical event waiting to happen. And that was the start of a fast friendship with them because they were so considerate. It's Miss, you know, they would bring you a drink, you know, were just so helpful and kind. And that was very appealing to me and so respectful and eager to learn. The church sponsors the 3T Youth Program, and 3T stands for Turn of the Tide. For young men ages 8 to 14, they're learning life skills, the importance of being a good member in our community. And so, again, that also is so appealing to me. It includes a 6-week summer program, and they schedule checkpoint meetings during the school year. Enrollment for summer 2023 in their program has returned to pre-COVID levels, and there's no charge to participate. Most of the parents could not afford a summer program for their children. In 2021, they asked me if I would be willing to provide gardening education. Over the years since 2016, I've been a financial sponsor of the group, but hadn't really contributed knowledge. So in 2021, we worked on soil and the importance of pollinator plants. There were some materials that I had developed in community outreach for a teacher education at the zoo on bees. And each person took home a grow bag with a new gold lantana plant at the end of the session. And everybody here probably knows that new gold lantana is a Texas superstar plant and on the top 100 plant list. So it's very easy to grow a new gold lantana and be successful. In summer of 2022, we focused on vegetable gardening. So 3 of the raised beds in the church garden were planted in the last week of June. Again, not the ideal time, but if you're tenacious enough, even when you plant in adverse conditions, you can still be successful. And the group also toured R&B1 Urban County Farm for inspiration. And the ladies at Urban County Farm really put together an inspiring and informative tour and were so helpful. So we really appreciated that. Of course, it was followed by a wonderful stop at Dairy Queen. So that's probably one of the highlights after you volunteer at R&B1. So here are a couple of pictures which I had on my phone, and I have to admit they're the only 2 I really had. So these are the gardens that the beds that we planted in summer of 2022, and the picture on your right was after it grew for a month or so. And the drip irrigation was not operational last summer, so a lot of tenacity and attention was paid to keeping those plants alive. And the one thing I'll say about gardening for youth is not only do you learn science and improve your vocabulary, but it also teaches responsibility because you're taking care of something. And so I think that's really important too. And it also emphasizes the importance of knowledge in increasing your chances of success. Because the plants were carefully selected, we were reading labels and doing a lot of education and planning to make sure we were successful. This fall, in fall of 2022, we started the Junior Master Gardener curriculum. And the one thing about, a quick thumbnail about Junior Master Gardener curriculum, It's a 4-H youth development program. Anyone can lead a junior master gardener group. So a lot of the groups that are doing junior master gardener are in fact 4-H groups. Youth clubs, you know, boys, I attended the national conference pre-COVID. Boys and girls clubs were introducing junior master gardener curriculum. So it's a broad curriculum. Being a master gardener helps, but you don't have to be a master gardener to use the materials that are provided. And it closely tracks master gardener training. And on the next slide, I have details on the units that are included in the curriculum. It's an ambitious program with a lot of requirements. It has 8 units with a total of 44 modules. And to be a certified junior master gardener, you have to complete a group and an individual activity for each one of the 44 modules included in these 8 units, and a group service project. So it is ambitious. At 3T, we're providing the participants with the Junior Master Gardener Handbook because they cost about $25 each. So that would be a barrier to them participating. And then for each of the individual activities, every learner is provided with a supply kit because we don't want lack of access to materials to be a barrier to being successful. So, if you look at these units, you know, plant growth and development, soil and water, insects and diseases, landscape horticulture, fruits and nuts, does it sound familiar? Vegetables and herbs. And then the last unit is life skills and career exploration, because there are a lot of great careers in horticulture available. And some of the young men in the program want to be chefs, have their own business and things, and you know, what a foundation knowing about produce and herbs and vegetables. How valuable would that be as a life skill or providing for your family? So in terms of upcoming activities, we're continuing Junior Master Gardener activities for the next school year. The checkpoint meeting schedule is still to be determined. Last year it was on Monday nights, so I was generally going on my own. And maybe it may move to Saturdays this year. It is a smaller group than summer, and attendance averages 5 to 10 participants per session. We're at a point where we need to assess what's our goal, because given, I'll say, the fluid nature of the attendance, when you look at all the criteria, I don't know that every student or every participant will be able to achieve, become a junior master gardener, but we can certainly give them a strong foundation and a lot of exposure to gardening, and probably the goal is going to be a little revised to say build a strong core or cohort of junior master gardeners, because there are a few young men that just consistently show up or able to consistently show up. So that's all I have. Thank you for your time and attention.
So today, we are privileged to learn more about plant pollinator pairing from Nancy Wilson, who is a Dallas County Master Gardener, a Texas Master Naturalist, and a Native Plant Society member and instructor. She has been learning about native plants and pollinators since 1998, but with a more concerted effort over the last 5 years. As a member of the Speakers Bureau, she gives talks on native plants, pollinators, and butterflies, and the need for native habitat. She was also the Speaker of the Year in 2022. Her own yard is a certified monarch way station, a wildlife habitat, and advanced bird-friendly habitat. Yogi Berra said, "You can observe a lot just by watching." Enchanted by watching as a participant in citizen science projects, Nancy has become hooked on learning from books, lectures, webinars, and fellow nature nerds about native plants and their pollinators. She enthusiastically shares what she has learned in hopes of intriguing the nature lover in you. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Nancy Wilson.
I'm sorry.
Are you all set?
I think so. Well, let's see. Am I on? Okay, great. I have a mouse somewhere. And we're already advanced one slide. Okay. Well, good morning, and thank you all for being here this morning. And I'm delighted to be here to talk about two of my favorite things, pollinators, and how you can have more fun in your garden by participating in citizen science. So as Cynthia said, I'm Nancy Wilson. I'm a Dallas County Master Gardener, and we're the volunteer arm of Texas AgriLife Extension, and our mission is to educate the public regarding good horticultural practices. So many of us are inspired by the poetry of Mary Oliver, and this one has kind of become my mantra over the last few years. She says, "Instructions for living a life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it." So I hope today that we'll learn some new ways to pay attention in our gardens and out in nature, that you'll see some things and you'll learn some things that are so astonishing they really grab your attention. And I hope you'll want to tell about it, and maybe tell about it through participating in citizen science. So have you ever had a spark experience? Something that was so exciting, it was so much fun, it was so wonderful, you couldn't wait to do it again. You couldn't wait to learn more, you couldn't wait to take a deeper dive. Well, this happened to me. Many of us, a few years ago, participated when Mike Merchant asked us to go out into our gardens and observe bees. It was a citizen science project called Six-Legged Aggie. And it started off with some training in teaching us how to identify honeybees and other bees, how to distinguish them from wasps and flies. And we were to go out in our garden every day or every whatever period and observe what we saw and report it. And I went out into my yard and I began to see bees I had never noticed before. I really didn't know anything about bees up until that point. But we have bees that are little bitty, great big, striped, metallic. There's all these fascinating bees, like this longhorn bee that has long antennae and really jazzy eyes and specializes on sunflowers. And I never knew anything about flies. We have all these crazy flies in our gardens, some that are very beneficial, like this 2-inch robber fly that catches its prey in midair. And some things were so beautiful and so fascinating that my photographer husband, Steve, just couldn't help but come out and help me. So one day we were out in the garden and we noticed this huge bee buzzing around. It's a really crazy flyer. And it was going to our passion vine. And so Steve captured this series of photos. And I took this photo and I sent it to Carol Clark. And she said, "Oh yeah, that's the eastern carpenter bee and it's the primary pollinator of passion vine." So Steve took this series, and you can see how this bee has come into the passion flower, and she is the perfect size and shape to collect the pollen off of the passion vine flower. And later Steve got a picture on another one of our passion vines, and so I popped that on Facebook, and I said, "Oh, that's the eastern carpenter bee, and it's the primary pollinator of passion vine." And Carol very sweetly and very quickly corrected me, and she said, "No, this one is the southern carpenter bee." And Texas is one of the few places where both the southern carpenter bee and the eastern carpenter bee can be found together. So just so we kind of review where we are, you took Pollinator 101 and you learned that the male part of the flower, the anthers, deliver the pollen. And the female part of the flower, the stigma, receives the pollen to pollinate the plant. And these two parts of the flower can be active at different times during a flower's life. So maybe early in the flower's life, the anthers will be active. And then later, the stigma will be active in an older flower, and that prevents them from self-pollinating. So this was my hooked moment. The idea that there was a special bee that was perfectly designed, hand in glove, to fit with a special flower was absolutely mind-blowing to me. How fabulous is nature? So I began to research this. You know, Google, carpenter bee, passion vine. And up came all of these YouTube videos and websites on how to hand pollinate your passion vine if you don't have carpenter bees in your garden. Well, you can see exactly, I stole this picture from one of those, and you can see exactly how the carpenter bee is the right size and shape to pollinate that flower. But the honeybee's coming in and it's getting the nectar and it's not doing a darn thing to help the flower. Some of us may grow this little bitty passion vine in our gardens, the Passiflora lutea, and we learned last month from Carol Clark that lutea means pale or yellow. And you can see what a teeny, teeny flower this is relative to my fingertips. And lo and behold, it has its very own passion vine bee that is specially made just to pollinate this flower. So this concept of coevolution was blowing my mind. I was like, this is so cool. So coevolution is the scientific theory that two or more organisms reciprocally affect one another's evolution through natural selection. So through tiny incremental changes over time, they respond to one another so that each becomes more effective at survival and at reproduction. So our first introduction to coevolution was back in 1862 when our buddy Charles Darwin, the king of evolution, received this box of orchids with this crazy long nectary on it. And he writes to his friend and he says, "I've just received a box of the most extraordinary orchids from Madagascar with a nectary almost a foot long. Good heavens, what insect can suck it? There must be a moth on the island of Madagascar with a proboscis of almost a foot long." Well, it wasn't until 1907, 20 years after Darwin died, that this subspecies of gigantic Congo moth was discovered on Madagascar with a proboscis almost a foot long. And they named it Ex Morgani predicti because it fulfilled Darwin's prediction. But then it wasn't until 1992, 130 years later, before somebody actually witnessed the moth on the orchid. They need more citizen scientists on Madagascar. So many of us who talk about native plants throw around this phrase that native plants and their pollinators co-evolved over thousands of years. And I say that in my talks because I heard somebody else say it and it sounded great. But I thought if I was going to talk today, I needed to really do my research. So looking back at the fossil records, we learned that insects appeared on the Earth about 350 million years ago in the Paleozoic. Flies, Hymenoptera, came along about 200 million years ago in the Mesozoic. Flowering plants didn't develop until the Cretaceous, about 135 million years ago, and we see those fossils in our Cretaceous limestone. Bees using flowers, not until 100 million years ago. And our butterflies and moths didn't appear until the Eocene, about 70 million years ago. So you can see over time, these plants and insects are coming into being and they're changing over time. In his book, Insects and Flowers, The Biology of a Partnership, Friedrich Barth describes how this happened. And he documents a family of flowers that would co-evolve and branch out so that it developed certain characteristics to match up with all of these different kinds of pollinators. And he tells us that insects exerted selection pressure on the plants to develop characteristics that were more attractive to insects. Well, in turn, the insects then had to develop sensory and learning capabilities to use those new traits. And he tells that the development of mouth parts actually was the pivotal thing that happened in this coevolution, because insects that couldn't chew couldn't ingest pollen. So a flower had to come up with nectar. And then a flower that had a long corolla needed an insect with a long tongue. And as these pollinators are going out and finding the flowers, they're looking for the flowers that do the best job at rewarding them, that have the best characteristics, and they select, just like a plant breeder selects now, the insect would choose the particular flowers that were the best. And those were the ones they pollinated, and those were the ones who reproduced. So today we look at our insects and we note that there is a range of pollination specialization. We have polylectic pollinators, like our honeybee or our butterflies, that can use a wide range of flowers. Oliglectic pollinators just focus on a certain family, like we'll talk about in a minute with a squash bee, that only uses cucurbit flowers. Monolectic pollinators are those that are so tightly tied together with their flower that one can't exist without the other. Many of you guys are already familiar with this concept of specialization because you already know the story of the monarch and milkweed. And you know that many of our butterflies are tied to one particular plant. The Gulf fritillarion passion vine, the pipevine swallowtail-on pipevine. We know this specialization story. Why would nature specialize? Well, on the one hand, it makes the plants and pollinators more vulnerable. So if you're tied to just one little partner in the world and your partner is in peril, you are also in jeopardy. So in these days when we have insecticides and herbicides and pesticides and loss of habitat and invasive species and climate change, these specialist pairings are in danger, which is one of the reasons that we need to really be planting our native plants to protect these plant pollinator pairings. But there's a lot of benefits to being a specialist too. So if you are a specialist bee and plant pairing, you're really good at getting that pollination happening. The plant is tailor-made for that pollinator, and the pollinator is going to make sure it does a good job pollinating the flower. And there's pollination consistency. So with our monolectic bees and our oliglectic bees, they already are going to deliver pollen from one kind of flower over to the very same kind of flower and make that pollination happen. But even among the generalist pollinators, they will have pollination consistency on a sortie. So during our six-legged Aggie thing, I would go out one day and I'd notice, today is honeybees on Gulf Coast penstemon day. Tomorrow is small carpenter bees on Salvia gregae. Maybe another day the small carpenter bees are on the bee balm. So the bees on a given day would choose a kind of flower, and they helped the flower be pollinated that way because they were just focusing on one kind of flower and delivering the right kind of pollen. Also, there's less competition. So if you are a carpenter bee and you've got passion vine, you're not fighting off anybody else to get the nectar or the pollen that you need because you've got your special plant just waiting for you. And then over time, these plants and pollinators reinforce the traits that help out one another. So what are some of those traits? Well, aroma. We know that a lot of flowers smell sweet because many bees are attracted to that sweet smell. But if you're a fly, you want a flower that smells putrid. And if you're a hummingbird, you really don't have much sense of smell at all, so the flower doesn't need to bother spending the energy to create an aroma. Bloom time is crucial. So this was something I never knew, that bees time their entire life cycle to pair up with the life cycle of the plants they service. And not just their life cycle, but also their daily habits. And we'll look at that in more detail in a little bit. Bloom shape is important too, because we have pollinators that have little short tongues. So they need flat flowers like our asters, or maybe bowl-shaped like the primrose. And pollinators with long tongues can use bell-shaped flowers or tubular flowers. We know from some of our good pollinator talks like Janet's Sex in the Garden, we learned about nectar guides, and flowers create these things to attract the bees. Well, that's great for bees, but hummers don't need those. And then a flower really wants to offer the reward that's going to attract its pollinator. So many flowers offer nectar, but the bees want pollen too. And there are some bees that are looking for an oil reward, and we'll look at some of those. So who are some of these co-evolved partners? Well, many of you already know the story of tequila and the agave and the long-nosed bat. So next time you drink a margarita, raise your glass to the agave and the long-nosed bat, because they are so tightly paired that one doesn't exist without the other. Look at this picture. This picture is taken at night. Bees and butterflies don't fly at night, but bats do. And this agave flower is open at night, and it is a pale color blossom, so it's visible. You can look at this bat and you can see it has a long nose and little bitty ears. So it's not like many bats that use echolocation to find their food. It's using its nose. And that agave puts out a certain scent that's attractive to the bat. The bat can hover, and so the agave doesn't have to offer a landing pad for its pollinator. And look at that long nose. That long nose is made especially to get in and get the nectar off that flower. And while it's in there getting the nectar, all of its fuzzy little bat hairs are picking up pollen. So this is one of our pairings. Another pairing that's really tightly dependent on one another is the yucca flower and the yucca moth. So just like the agave, the yucca blooms at night, and it's a pale color that's visible at night, and it's pollinated by a night-flying pollinator. So this little yucca moth, they mate in the spring, the male dies, and the female is charged with laying eggs and starting the next generation. So she has these special tentacles where she can collect the pollen with these tentacles. And she takes the pollen from one yucca flower, and she purposely finds another yucca flower that hasn't yet been pollinated, because it's so important for her to pollinate that yucca flower. She uses her special little tools to deposit the pollen deep within the female part of a yucca flower, because it's her life, her next generation is dependent on that flower being pollinated. And of course the yucca loves this, because wow, you talk about efficiency. I've got somebody dedicated to making sure I get pollinated. So she puts the pollen inside the female part of the flower, and then she lays her eggs there. And her little baby, her larvae, eat the fruit and the seeds that yucca produces. But they don't eat all the seeds. They leave plenty for the yucca to reproduce. So now we get to bees. I never knew that we have over 800 species of native bees here in Texas. And they are attracted to, of course, our native plants. 90% of our native bees are solitary bees. They don't have a social nest. 70% of them nest in the ground, and 30% in cavities. And these bees time their life cycle to the plants they service. So they overwinter in different stages. They might overwinter as a pupa or a larva or even an adult bee, because they emerge when the flowers that they service are ready to be pollinated. Bees are attracted to flowers that have bilateral symmetry. So they like a flower that has a mirror image. And they're attracted to flowers that are in the blue, yellow, and purple color ranges. This is some of the data that came out of our Six-Legged Aggie Citizen Science Project. So you can see that the purple and pink flowers were way more popular with the bees. A little bit the yellow and the orange, not so much the red. Because a bee sees from ultraviolet up into yellow, a little bit into orange, but red is kind of muddy brown to them. This is a flower. The yellow is kind of the way we would see it. But with the bee's ultraviolet spectrum, they can see the nectar guide so much better than we can. You can see the flower on the right is the very same flower, just with a bee's eyes, and how that nectar guide is just like a big billboard to them. Bees like flowers that require some physical manipulation. So many of us have learned that bumblebees are capable of buzz pollination. They can grab hold of a flower and vibrate it to shake the pollen loose. And that's important for our flowers that have what we call porocidal anthers, where the pollen is contained within this tube. You may have learned in order to get your tomatoes to pollinate, you have to shake those flowers. Well, that's what the bee is doing. And you can see, like on this senna plant, that there's a lot of places for the bee to come in and attach and shake the flower to get that pollen going. Similarly, when spring comes around and our bluebonnets are blooming, go out and look and see if you can find a bee manipulating the keel of that pea flower. They use their legs to push it down and reveal the reproductive parts of the flower. Bees with long tongues can use a little bit of a tubular flower, but they need a flower that has a landing pad. You can see this bumblebee with that long tongue tucked under, coming in for a landing, and it can use a little bit of a deeper flower than some bees. But bees with medium tongues or short tongues need a flat flower to reach the nectar. And our little bitty bees, this is frog fruit, you know, little tiny, tiny blossom. Our little bitty bees need tiny blossoms or composite flowers. This is one of my favorite specialist pairings because we talked about how bees and their plants time their life cycles together. This is a squash bee, and it pollinates cucurbit plants. So those of us who grow vegetables may know that cucurbit flowers only open for a short period of time, early in the morning. Well, this bee, I don't know if you can see with my mouse, it has special little ocelli, special eyes that allow it to see at dark and near darkness. So this bee gets up and she is cracking. She gets up at the crack of dawn and she is out there pollinating that squash. And she has special little hairs on her legs. I can't get this to do. She has unbranched scopa. So the honeybees might have finer scopa, but the leg hairs on a squash bee are very, have a lot of space in them, because the pollen grains of squash are large pollen grains. So that bee is particularly designed to pick up those large pollen grains that a honeybee might not be able to pick up. This is Crumeria. So for those of you who like to get out on the prairie, this is one of our beautiful prairie plants that appears along about May. And it's one of the flowers that offers oil as its reward. So it's dependent upon the centrus bee. And the centrus bee is just the right size and shape to come in and gather that oil, which it mixes with pollen to feed its larvae, and to pollinate the Crumeria flower, or rhatany. This is, according to iNaturalist, this is where we see centrus bees, and you can see it's a lot in the warm parts of the country and in Mexico. But the Crumeria is a very limited range. But Crumeria is only found where there are centrus bees. So centrus bees can use other oil-producing plants, but the Crumeria is completely dependent on the centrus bee to reproduce. Another of our really fun prairie plants is the spring beauty. So if you get out on the prairie in late February, early March, you may see these tiny flowers that kind of grow in clumps. They're beautiful. And they are dependent on the spring beauty bee. Now, unlike the squash bee, the spring beauty bee does not report to the office until about 10. She knocks off at 2:30. She only works in the warm weather, and that's partly because the flower only opens on sunny days. You won't find the spring beauty on a cloudy, rainy, chilly day. So they are timed together, their life cycles and their daily routines. And one thing that's really cool about the spring beauty bee, too, is that in the afternoon when she's finished with her work, she climbs down into her hole where she's laid her eggs and covers that up with dirt. And that protects her and her larvae from nighttime predators. Many of you probably grow wine cup in your gardens, this beautiful magenta flower. And you can see that super white pollen in the middle of it. Well, not surprisingly, it is pollinated by the wine cup bee. And I've never seen a wine cup bee, but this is a wine cup bee hole. And the wine cup bees are actually able to ingest pollen, so we saw that super white pollen. Well, that makes super white bee poop. And she's a fastidious little nest keeper, and she kicks the poop out of her nest. But that's one of the ways that we can identify that this is a wine cup bee nest. And we think maybe she does that so she can mark the hole for where she needs to find her home, to go back home. Next we get to hummingbirds. So Steve and I went to Mexico not long ago, and we learned that the word they use in Mexico for hummingbirds is chupamirto, which means salvia sucker. Well, remember our history of the Earth scale, and we thought bees and butterflies kind of showed up late by showing up 70 million years ago. We don't find hummers in the fossil record until 22 million years ago. There are other long-billed pollinating birds, like the sunbird in Africa, but the hummingbird is the only one that's able to hover. And hummingbirds are only found in the Americas. So what are some of the traits that the hummingbird has with the flowers that it uses? Well, hummingbirds have long bills, so they can access those flowers, the tubular flowers or flowers with long corollas. They have a highly developed ability to perceive red, so they are highly attracted to red flowers. And we know that hummingbirds are very busy. They have a high metabolic need. So they're looking for flowers whose nectar contains a lot of sucrose, as opposed to bees that use fructose and glucose. And hummingbirds have an ability to hover, so their flowers don't have to offer a landing pad. Now, this is a wonderful picture that our talented friend Starla Willis took, and she gave me permission to use. And you can see this hummingbird has come in and it's accessing that deep nectary. And its forehead is in the perfect position to transfer pollen from flower to flower. Yeah. This is a little carpenter bee, and you can see it's getting down into the nectar, but it's not going to pollinate that flower. There's more to this story than meets the eye. Not only does the hummingbird have a long bill, but it also has this super long tongue. Its tongue is so long that it has to coil around its little bird brain to store it. These are some of the flowers that we typically grow in our gardens to attract hummingbirds. So standing cypress, Turk's cat, flame acanthus. And you can see that these flowers are red. They have very long corollas for that long beak. And they have all the reproductive parts of the flower extend way beyond the bloom. That puts them in the perfect position to transfer pollen onto the hummingbird's head. You may go out into your garden like I go out into mine, and you see red flowers and blue flowers and tubular flowers and not so tubular flowers, and maybe you see bees on some and hummingbirds on some and some that are used by both. And there are flowers that are pollinated by both, but there are a lot of times they're just getting the nectar and they're not really pollinating. There's all kinds of scientific studies now that are looking at which salvias are pollinated by which pollinator. There are over 900 species of salvias across the world. But in the Americas, where we have hummingbirds, we have certain species. We have 40 species in North America, about 350 in Central America, and 210 in South America. And the scientists are theorizing that at one point, all salvias were pollinated by bees. But remember, our hummingbirds were kind of late in the game showing up. And so they think that they are documenting a transfer, a coevolution of salvias being pollinated by bees to being pollinated by hummingbirds. So they looked at all of these characteristics of these flowers. You know how scientists are. They studied they measured the length of the corolla, the size of the lip, the position of the flower. Does it offer a landing pad? Does it offer aroma? All of these characteristics of the flowers. And they determined that there are certain species of salvia that are strictly pollinated by hummingbirds. Those are in the little red part. And certain salvias that are strictly pollinated by bees. Those are the ones in the blue. And not only that about salvias, but salvias are so cool that they have a little mechanism, an active lever inside that delivers the pollen. So most flowers, it's just static pollen delivery. The pollen and the nectar are hanging out on the flower's not doing a thing. But salvia is active. So you can see on the left side, the bee comes in for the nectar, and it triggers the male part of the flower to come down and to deliver the pollen on the back of the bee. Well, as we talked about, that the male part and the female part of the flower are active at different times in a flower's life, that bee then goes to a little bit older flower, comes in for the nectar, and deposits that pollen onto the female part of the flower. And of course, as scientists do, they really get down into the weeds about this, and they start looking at different sizes of blooms and bees, and they notice that that lever is delivering pollen on different parts of a bee. And they think this is part of the way that salvia has speciated so much, in how those species don't cross-pollinate, but they become more and more specialized. And you can see on this salvia that is a hummingbird pollinated one, the anthers are in the position to deliver the pollen on the sides of the hummingbird's face. In these two salvias, the anthers come down and deliver the pollen on the top of the hummingbird's head. And they actually took little museum specimens of stuffed little hummingbirds and stuffed them inside flowers and said, oh, where does the pollen deliver on this flower, on this hummingbird? So, you know, they looked at this, where the pollen was being deposited on the hummingbird. So here's a little parlor trick you can play in your yard. This is a Salvia garnitica, and I'm going to come in with my stick and pretend to be a hummingbird. There goes the lever. Cool. Or the Salvia darcii, you can actually see the lever through the flower. And you come in and pretend like you're a pollinator. Down comes the lever. And this is a young flower where the male part of the flower is active. But you can see the stigma up there. So in an older flower, that stigma is going to drop down and receive the pollen. You can even do this with mealy blue sage, which has a much smaller flower and a smaller corolla, but it was kind of hard to video that. But you can see this is a bee-pollinated salvia. So it has a landing pad, and the bumblebee with that long tongue can come in and it's going to activate that lever. So for some reason, in 2022, there were all kinds of scientific papers issued about this coevolution of salvia and their pollinators. There must have been a grant out there, or lots of grad students needed something to do. But they are really looking at this whole concept that salvias and their pollinators have co-evolved in different ways and have speciated. And they say that salvias and hummingbirds particularly speciate easily. So I'm telling you about citizen science, and this is a time to pull out your cell phone and maybe take some screenshots, or I'll put these links somewhere where you can access them. But there is a citizen science project right now today put out by Audubon called Hummingbirds at Home. And they're asking citizen scientists like you and me to go out and observe the hummingbirds in our yards, when they show up, what flowers they're feeding on, whether or not we have feeders in our yard. Because they're trying to document how climate change is affecting the hummingbirds, and also how the plants that we buy at the nursery are affecting the hummingbirds. So I encourage you to get out in your garden and go look. Be a Mary Oliver and pay attention. Much of what we understand about butterflies we owe to a 13-year-old girl who was born in Germany in 1647, Maria Sibylla Marian, took her watercolors out into her garden, and with photographic accuracy, she recorded what she saw. She saw a butterfly laying an egg becoming a caterpillar a chrysalis a butterfly. And this was revolutionary. Up to that point, no one had made the connection of this life cycle. They thought butterflies were associated with the gods, were spiritual, wonderful beings, and that caterpillars were associated with the devil and were awful. And they didn't know that it was all one critter. So this was revolutionary. It was the beginning of moving our understanding of nature away from philosophers to observational science. It was the beginning of what we call the scientific method. This was a huge change in our understanding of science and nature. So Maria Sibylla Merian was one of the first citizen scientists. So get out in your garden, and you might be lucky enough, like Steve, to find this little bee nectar robbing, drilling a hole in the side of the flower to get the nectar. Go out and look and see who's out there and what are they up to. Plant things close enough to your window so when you're sitting at your desk or you're washing your dishes, you can see what's going on in your garden. So Yogi Berra said, you can observe a lot just by watching. So I hope that we will all get out and watch and become part of citizen science. You'll get a little homework and you'll learn something. Maybe you'll learn, is this a bee or a fly? Or your homework might be one day to find an orange pollinator on an orange flower. And when you're out looking for things that are orange, you might find out the difference between the evil leaf-footed bug nymph versus the good, beneficial milkweed assassin bug. Or maybe your homework will be to learn how to identify ladybugs. Right now today, there's a citizen science project that is asking us to go out and find dead butterflies and moths. Don't kill them, find them already dead. And mail them in to this citizen science project, because scientists are wanting to understand how environmental contaminants like pesticide and antibiotics are affecting the life of our lepidopteran. There is a citizen science project for you no matter what your interests are. All kinds of things, birds, bugs, plants. There are many, and I'll send these links around. So there's another famous Mary Oliver poem. You know the one where she says, what are you going to do with your one wild and precious life? Well, much of that poem, she is watching a grasshopper, and she's watching it chew. And she says, I know how to pay attention. So I hope all of us will pay attention and be astonished and tell about it. And I hope you'll participate in citizen science. I have one more little slide while I have the floor. The Native Landscape Certification Program that's put on by NIPSOT is going to be open for registration very soon. These classes fill up quick because they're so popular, and there's such great information for learning how to use native plants, how to put them in our gardens and out into our public spaces. The level 1 class is a prerequisite for all the other classes. The other classes can be taken in any order. So the classes consist of Zooms on Saturdays, kind of 9 to 2. And then on Sundays, there's a 90-minute plant walk where we go out and actually see the plants in situ. So the level 1 class will be offered September 23rd and 24th, the level 3, November 4th and 5th. And I have all the information about this out on our various links and places that you can find it. You can also go to nipsot.org and find that registration information. So thank you very much.
Questions for Nancy? Wasn't that an incredible talk?
Thank you, Starla.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy. That was great. It was great. We loved it. We loved it. Okay. We have learned that 2 of our award winners are here with us now, and we'd really love to recognize them. Could Lisa Patterson and Mary Claire Milner please come up? As you recall, we talked about both of you receiving our Making a Difference Award for your incredible work at RB1. Mary Claire, turn around because Starla's going to take a picture. Thank you so much for all that you do at RB1 and everywhere else. And this says, what I said is already here, so you could read it.
I will read it. Thank you.
But thank you so much for all you do. And Lisa, 2,500 hours and counting.
I know, it's a lot of work, isn't it?
Thank you for all you do. Good job.
How are we?
Okay. All right. So now for our plant raffle. Zondra's going to lead the plant raffle. We need the next slide, don't we?
The next slide
Oh, there it is. It's up. Okay. So get out your pink tickets. I'm going to get mine, just in case. Isn't that pretty? And I can hand out, and where are our tickets?
Okay, we've got 2 books, 2 watermelons, and plates. You can take what you want. One is the history of the native nut pecan.
Yep.
And one's the mother of all arts. You've read that. Okay. Agrarianism and the creative impulse. So anyway, we're going to.
Okay, so pick. I could hold it for you. There you go.
Thank you. Person behind the curtains. No, not really. Okay, the last 3 digits are 773.
Yay, Margaret.
773. Margaret, come on up.
Yay.
So. Pick what you want. The next
That's the list.
3 numbers, 717.
The rose milkweed. That is the Indian pink. The rose milkweed is this one, if that's what you want. What will do better in the sun? You have
They've
dark
got
shade?
tags on them.
No.
If you want to
Yes.
know.
Or some.
Yeah. There
Yes,
you go.
pick whichever one you like.
Pick whatever one you want. Seven, 4, 6. All right,
JD.
JD. Come on up.
Yeah, that's a beautiful one. They're all beautiful.
These are, of course, from Texas
If you have
Discovery
any shade,
Garden.
this is an Indian pink, and they're very hard to come by. But if you don't, any of the others are great too. The witch. Oops. Is that a This is Salvia gregii, autumn sage fuchsia.
Firebush.
Firebush. Sorry. Skullcap. Those are always wonderful. Here you go.
Seven, 0, 7. All right.
Go, Susan. Hey. Oh, I believe you. That's an Indian pink.
Pinks are beautiful.
Which are really pretty. They're unusual.
Firebush.
And Mexican firebush and a salvia.
Salvia gregii.
Salvia gregii.
Yep. Good. 7, 6, 7. 7, 6, 7.
Yeah.
Lisa!
Oh, Lisa!
You want a watermelon? I mean, what are you growing? So you have the seeds or something for your garden?
Mexican firebush, and this is Salvia gregii fuchsia, autumn sage. Sun.
Yeah, take that beautiful plant.
That's gorgeous, yes.
7, 2, 3. 7. Come on. You want me to?
Lisa,
Got 1 plant, 2 watermelons, 2 books.
2 books. Do you have another one?
Mm-mm.
Probably when you grew. Great.
Okay. 7, 7, 4. Sarah. I've read The Pecan. It's a great book. It's an easy read. Okay, Sarah.
Right over here.
2 watermelons, 2 books.
They're personal, so they're probably not too heavy.
Yeah. Great.
Congratulations.
Okay.
7, 3, 2.
Yay!
Hey,
Bernie.
come on.
Here, you little watermelon.
You
Here
can have
go.
seeds next year.
Yeah,
Okay.
2 more.
2 books left. 7, 4. Gonna have to 3. 7, 4, 3.
Cookie.
Cookie. Okay, last one.
Just put it here if you want.
Oh, 7, 4, 4. Anybody? Anybody?
7, 4, 4.
7, 4, 4.
If not, here we go.
Oh no. 7, 4, 9. 7, 4, 9.
Anybody?
Somebody left?
Okay.
7, 6, 2. Huh?
Gary.
Just what you want. Come on. Oh my goodness. We're on a pain. Here. You get your, learn about pecans.
Are we ready for our next slide?
Yes. If we're gonna get it up there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, everybody.
So There will be no monthly meeting in August. I know. What will we do without it? Our next meeting will be Thursday, September 28th, and it will be via Zoom. So there won't be an in-person meeting until October. Our speaker will be Jaime Gonzalez from the Nature Conservancy in Texas.